All right, so here we are at a 14% state of charge, 152. That's the max I've seen on this session, on this V3. That's it. That's all she'll do. Hey, I'm glad I'm getting a new car.
Overall, this charging curve for the new refresh 2021, hands down, blows away this Model S 100D. Hello and welcome to another episode of Out of Spec Dave. You know, today it's all about charging. And I've been doing some testing in my new 2021 Model S refresh. And one of the reasons why I bought this car was because I was very unhappy with the 2018 Model S 100D that I bought in terms of not so much the range, but the charging curve. And so today, what I've done is I've compiled all the data. I've done four separate charging sessions on my new Model S compared to one very representative charging session on my 2018. And I'm going to take you through the numbers and show you, am I happy? Am I unhappy with the reason that I upgraded? Let's get into it. Okay, so just to take you a step back, I had been in an Ioniq 5 for quite a while. For me, at least, quite a while. I was in there and loved that car. I mean, the charging speed on that thing was insane. The range was a lot to be desired. And there were a couple of stretches down in Florida where I really had to plan out my trip. It's a combination of the CCS network not really being as conveniently located as the Tesla supercharging network. The lack of dog mode in the Ioniq 5 for Bailey, although I could put it in utility mode. But so you'll remember that with the Ioniq 5, I had to rely on the Electrify Americas network. And while for the most part, it was pretty reliable, I mean, I did run into some issues here and there, and I've reported on those. But I think that they are improving that network. But I wanted to go back to Tesla. I wanted to check out what has happened with Tesla since I owned a number of them years ago. And I found that the numbers for what the Vrooms of the world and the Carvanas of the world were giving in terms of my Hyundai were just stupid money. So I said, you know what? Sold to you. You buy my Ioniq 5. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a longer range Model S. I figure 100D. It's got to be a great charging vehicle. Years ago, I had an 85 plus. And that thing really did not charge well at all. In fact, I think there may have been some lawsuits, class action lawsuits against Tesla on that car for how nerfed that battery pack got. But at the end of the day, I said, you know, I don't want to get a 75D because I want to have a longer range. So let me get a 100D. I didn't even consider the new Model S refresh. I had one on order. I said, if I really enjoy this Model S, the 100D, I'll go ahead and I'll either buy the new Lucid or when that comes out in the pure form, or which I may still do, we'll see. But I could actually go ahead and take delivery of the new Model S, the refresh one, the one with the yoke. So anyway, I thought I'd be really happy with the 100D. And again, it was a 2018, had high mileage. So the battery pack was a little bit older, 62,000 miles, but still in terms of electric vehicles and Teslas, maybe at most it should have lost 5 to 7% in terms of the range, but I didn't expect it to charge as poorly as it did. And so I really was quite unhappy. A lot of you may have watched my road trip video when I came back from Florida. Over the summer, I drove it back from Florida up here to Connecticut. Actually bought the car down in Miami just at an Infiniti dealership down there. As a matter of fact, my wife picked it up for me, and while she was down in Florida, and man, what an ordeal. Had a lot of issues with it. Wasn't connected to the network for a while, but anyway, as I got that car, I went down to Florida. And I was quite happy with the car for the money it was. It was a really good deal. But on the way home, I wasn't even halfway home, and I realized I'm not keeping this car because I went from an Ioniq 5, which I loved, and the charging curve was insane on that car, even though the range wasn't as good. I was much slower and road tripping with this Model S 100D than I was with the Ioniq 5. So I looked around and I found a used 2021 that some of you have watched my videos, have seen that I report on, but I've been waiting until now to get enough data to be able to share with you as to whether or not the charging curve, the speed with which it charges, this new refresh 2021, was worth it or not. And I'm happy to share with you that I am very happy. So what I've done is, let me share my screen. The first curve is this orange one right over here. The second curve is, I did that one on September 11th. The second one I did on October 2nd, which is this blue curve right here. The third curve I did was on October 8th, which is the yellow curve right here. And then the fourth curve is this light blue curve on October 23rd. I put the temperatures on each one of these. So it was 64 degrees out, 55 degrees, 60 degrees, and 61 degrees. And what I had done was I had put on preconditioning, and I had driven the car, not super hard, but I got the battery pack warm, warm enough to optimal temperatures. Now, I don't have an OBD2 port that I can plug into the Tesla like I did on the Ioniq 5 to be able to check to see if I had the battery temperature at optimal temperature. But for the most part, what I did was I relied on the battery preconditioning to put in the destination of the supercharger that I went to, and made sure that when I arrived, as best I could, the battery pack was hopefully at optimal temperature to receive as much energy as possible. Now, what I had done back, I think it was a while before, just before I sold the Model S, the 100D, I actually did a similar charging curve, and I mapped that. So let's start with that. So I took all the numbers, as you can see over here, and then basically from 0% state of charge all the way down to 80% state of charge. And all I did was I logged, and I just put all the numbers here. I have videos for each one of these curves that I can show you. Perhaps I'll embed some of those where I just put the camera in front of the screen, just to kind of see exactly where I was at each percentage state of charge. And I just put all the numbers into a spreadsheet, and then graph this, because you know what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and in this case, it's very true. The bottom line is that the 2018 Model S, the 100D, it took 52 minutes to go from 10% to 80%. And the reason I'm putting in 10% to 80% is because I know that in the EGMP platform cars, which are the quote 800 volt cars, Teslas are still in the 400 plus volt range. Not to say that necessarily matters, but I would say that I need to learn a little bit more about why voltage or higher voltage matters. But what I can tell you is that I had experienced multiple times, not only with the Ioniq 5, but also with my wife's GV60, 10% to 80%, 18 minutes. The car just rips when you're on a 350. It'll charge, only the maximum I've ever seen is 241 kilowatts on any of the EGMP platform cars from South Korea. However, they hold it deep into the pack. And let me explain what I mean by that. So let's take a look at first, the way I've set up this spreadsheet is on the y-axis. I've got the state of charge is at the bottom, which is the x-axis, and then the y-axis I have the kilowatts, and you'll see that you know, the EA goes all the way up to 350 kilowatts, whereas these I plugged in every single time to a V3 version 3 supercharger on all of these sessions. Now, one of the downsides about Tesla that I forgot about is that there, especially in more remote areas, there are a lot of V2s still out there. And what happens with version 2s is they will force split if you're sharing a cabinet with another car. So it's not as if there's dynamic sharing like Electrify America is doing on their latest versions of their units that are actually splitting the energy. But what I did was I plugged into 250s here, V3s in every single case. And the reason is because V2s only go a maximum of, I think it's 150. But if you're sharing a cabinet with someone else, the max you're going to pull is like an urban supercharger of 75 kilowatts. And that is nowhere near as good as the experience that you'll get at Electrify America. Whereas, you know, if you pull into an EA station, there are 8 charging stations and 6 of them are 150s. You know that you're going to get 150. And with the higher voltage cars with the EGMP platforms, I was pulling, you know, commonly 160, 170 kilowatts. And again, deep into the pack on those cars. So the measure that I really wanted to compare here was that 10 to 80%. And you can see that the Model S on this charging curve, I plugged in at 7% state of charge. So right over here, you can see it's 7%, and it takes a little while for it to ramp up, which is a common theme with these Teslas. You don't just, even if I'm at optimal temperature, because I've used battery preconditioning, it's as though when you first plug in, the car kind of like says, all right, let me figure out what I'm going to do here before I ramp it up. And you can see that the ramp up took from 7% all the way to 12, what is that, 12%, 11%, where it actually pretty much peaked out at around 150 kilowatts. And then it stayed in 150 and it started tapering at around 18, 19. By the time you got to, let's say, 23%, we're definitely under one. Let me just look at the numbers over here. 23%, you know, you can see I peaked out at 152, and by 23%, I was at 143, then 137. By the time I hit 30%, I was down to 120 kilowatts. So this is why on that Florida trip, I was super frustrated. So anyway, I left it plugged in all the way to 80%. You can see it's a pretty linear curve. But this is what we talk about when we talk about the taper, right? So this is kind of the ramp up, the peak, and then the taper. And it's kind of like, you know, attack, decay, sustain, and then it releases in music. And so it's kind of a similar thing here. So it'll ramp up, sustain, then it sort of, you know, it releases and tapers. And the whole taper all the way down to 80%. What was I pulling at 80% on this car? 37 kilowatts at 80%. But at the end of the day, what that meant was it took 52 minutes to charge from 10%, even though I plugged in at 7% just for consistency on this test. It took from 10% to 80%, 52 minutes. And I'm sitting there saying on this road trip, what did I do? I mean, I know this Model S has got air suspension. It's a beautiful car. It looks great, this 100D, but I got rid of my Ioniq 5. Now, yeah, I made money on it because I got stupid money for it selling it. So I wasn't like economically upset, but realistically, I was like, I made a mistake here. This car charges like crap. So, so anyway, I really made a mistake with this car. For me personally, what I use every single day, it was fine, but I'm planning on doing a lot more road tripping, and it just wasn't the car for me. And I knew it. I guess I knew it. Whatever. Let's move on. So, in terms of moving on, what I did was, instead of buying a brand new refresh, a 2022 Model S for, I don't know, I think it was like 109,000 by the time, 108,000 with destination, and I found one for 93K. 93,000 with 22 or 23,000 miles on it. That's my white on white car. And I got it from CarMax, and the car's been great. There are a lot of differences between the Model S 100 or 75, the older generation Model S's, and this new refresh. I'll make a separate video about that just in my own terms. I'm sure you've heard it or studied it, but I can tell you maybe some of the subtle differences that mean a lot to me, that are beyond just charging and range. But this car, it delivers, in my opinion. Still not quite as good, to be honest, as, let's say, the Taycan charging curve. Even though the Taycan's got a very short range, not the greatest car for me. That's a car that you'll go, you'll charge really fast, let's say upwards of 270, but the taper is pretty deep in the pack. This car here, I'm well into the 300-mile range in terms of my 2021. But what I did was I plugged in on 9/11, and this was a full charge that I went from 1% all the way to 80%. And you can see that at 1%, it immediately pulled 150. I was a little bummed out that it wasn't pulling 250 faster than that. But this is something that I've noticed with these Teslas is they take their time. They get plugged in and then they ramp up. And you can see by the time I got to 8%, it was pegged at 250. I mean, if you look at the numbers here, where is this? Where's the 911? Oh yeah, here. So you can see 149 at 8%, it hit 250, and it stayed at 250 all the way to 31%, where it started to taper off like at from 249 down to 242, from 31% state of charge to 32% state of charge. And the net result was that particular charging session, and you'll see here in a minute, I had 3 good charging sessions and 1 poor one, which I'm gonna say 3 versus 1. It's this one charging session that I did on 1023 was not great, but you can see that there's a consistent theme that the Model S kind of falls off at around 31%. And again, these were all done at relatively the same temperatures. It's not 18 minutes, right? Like the Ioniq 5, but I have so much more range. And you're also, this is I don't know, roughly 100 kilowatt hour battery pack versus the Ioniq 5, which is 77.4 kilowatts. So you're actually probably taking in energy. I don't want to say you are taking it in faster for a long period of time, because you're going from, let's just say, from 8% all the way to 31%, pulling 250. And the max that I might, even though I was plugged into a 350, the max my one Ioniq 5 ever pulled was 241. And it really didn't hold it that long. It went down to like 238, 235. But 225, it would hold 220s deep into the pack, that Ioniq 5. But this is solid. This is pulling a strong amount of energy. That was on 9/11. Then on 10/2, you can see that I pulled in, and I was all pumped and psyched about this car being great. And then I pulled in on October 2nd at, what is this, 7% state of charge? Where am I over here? Yeah, 7% state of charge. And I was like, okay, why isn't it ramping up here? And the max that it pulled was like 240, maybe 240. Let me just look at this. The October 2nd. Oh, I see. This needs to go up here, this charging curve. So let's talk about how, apologies for that. I got a lot of data in my brain. Anyway, the 10/2 charging curve, I plugged in at 7% state of charge, and the ramp up was quick. It went up to 250, held it, fell off at that 31, 32% again, and then from 10 to 80%, it was 28 minutes. So I was real happy with that again. Then on 10/8, I pulled in at whatever state of charge this is, 8%, and you can see it ramped up again quickly, and then it stayed all again. There's this consistent theme where it ramps up, from 8% to, what is it, 14%, or from 7% to 12%. So there's that 5-6% state of charge where the Tesla is going to ramp up, and then it's going to peg it at 250, assuming you're on a V3, and then it's going to fall off and go relatively flat or linear all the way down to 80%, which is fine. That's a decent curve. You can see that on the 10/8 curve, I actually pulled. This was quite amazing, but on the 10/8 curve, I actually pulled 254 right here, at 100 and what state of charge was I at? At 20% state of charge, it popped up to 254, So that was impressive in terms of the peak. But again, that was probably an anomaly, because then it consistently it fell off. And then you can see it did some funky stuff on this session over there. Who knows? That could be, I have no idea why it did that. But I want to talk about this last session here on 1023. Speaking of anomalies, I plugged in at 6%, and then what ended up happening was it was 60 degrees out. 10 to 80% was 35 minutes, and you could see that it didn't even get up more than like 242, somewhere in there. So there's a couple of things I would summarize by saying that overall, this charging curve for the new refresh 2021 hands down blows away this Model S 100D. Now, I only have one curve here, but this is representative. The fastest I ever saw the 100D charge was 161, and it held it for maybe 30 seconds, and then it tapered off. And this was on V3s all the time. It just was not a good charging machine. I can only surmise that if 75Ds would be the same way, 90Ds. Please chime in if you're seeing data different than what I'm seeing here with these older generation. I call them older generations, but let's say first half of the year 2021 and going back for the more recent cars, their charging curves were just not good. And so major difference. I'm super happy. It's the combination of the greater range with this car, the 2021 refresh, with the faster charging speed. I wish it held it deeper into the pack, but still not terrible that you're pulling way north of you're pulling 200 pretty much consistently up till the high 36s, and then it does taper off from there. But there's a couple of other pieces of information that I want to share with you here from a strategy standpoint. One of the things that you can see is this point right here, where it's 31 to 32%. In all three of these charging curves, these, let's call them the good charging curves for the 2021 refresh, they all consistently, repeatedly fell off at 31, 32%. Let me know if you see the same thing. But the reason why this is important to understand and to see this on the graph is because when that car, the faster that you can get up to that 250 and hold that 250, if you're going to have a consistency of always falling off at 31 and 32%, the faster you can get that up to 250, the better off you are. Yellow curve from October 8th curve, when I pulled in on October 8th at 8%. So that difference between 1% and 8% state of charge to pull in, I'm pulling 250 for that full differential between those two. And again, it stays consistent all the way to 31, 32%. So just to summarize, I'm happy. I'm happy with this car. I think there's room for improvement with this curve. I think they could get more aggressive and let it stay deeper into the pack, maybe bring it out to 40% to 250 before it'll taper. And I would love to see them alter the curve so it ramps up a little bit faster, instead of taking 5, 6, 7 kilowatts or a percentage of state of charge before it will actually kick in and max out at the 250. I'd love to see that cut in half, and I'd love to see them extend this 31, 32% taper out to maybe 40, 41%. So for road tripping, it would even be faster. And the reason I say that is because the Lucid definitely charges at a much higher peak. You can see this 300 here on my chart. If I were graphing a Lucid, I would have to have an extra category, because we're hearing people are pulling way north of 315, in some cases even north of 320 kilowatt peak. What I need to do is do a little bit more research around the charging curves on the Lucids. But if the charging curve on the Lucid goes peak way up here at 320 and it falls off down here, in the 20% range and comes down, tapers, you got to look at the overall charging curve. And that's why I kind of like this sort of Hyundai endorsed 10 to 80%. That's sort of a real world. Even 80% is a strong number to charge to. I would probably only charge to maybe 60%, especially with the Tesla supercharger network being so ubiquitous. One other thing, I do have my CCS adapter on its way. I've just been waiting for it from Tesla. This is going to allow me to plug my 2021 Tesla into the CCS network, whether that's EA or what have you. And what I'm looking forward to doing is to plug my Tesla into a 350 EA, or maybe one of the new charge points or EV Go's that are 500 amps. I want to really see and compare the charging curve with my CCS adapter on my Tesla. And I'm really interested to see how that charging curve actually comes out. And I'll map that. I'll probably throw that curve right against this data. So, what I would do is I would throw out this anomaly, this blue line from the 23rd, and say that, I've got 3 real good data points here, charging sessions, and I'm super happy with with this 2021. So one other point I want to make, specifically around Tesla, being back in a Tesla, is that while the charging sessions have been awesome here on V3s for the most part, when you run into a V2 and you have to share, you're only pulling 72, 73 kilowatts. And that, I know I mentioned it earlier, compared to the CCS, is just not good. But there's another factor here, which is that new CCS adapter that's on its way here. That's going to give me the ability to go and comparison shop. So what I'll do is when I'm on a road trip and I'm looking to charge up, assuming that the charging curve is good with the EA or with one of these other sessions or one of these other networks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to price shop. Just like, you're driving down the street and you see Shell, you see Mobil, you see Exxon or whatever, Mobil Exxon, you see Getty Gas, and you say, all right, the price of gas is this price here, the price of gas is over here. It's pretty much a commodity, right? Gas is gas. It's got different ratings, but whatever octane. But if you can save a few bucks, you'll go to one gas station versus the other. And when you think about it, a lot of these Tesla superchargers, they're charging sometimes, very expensive for on a kilowatt. I don't have free charging for my Tesla. But if I think it's $4 or $5 a month, you can buy a membership to Electrify America and buy down the rate to 31 cents a kilowatt hour, 31 cents, a kilowatt hour. And if you compare that to, I think the peak rate in Naples from 12 noon to 9 p.m. is something like 54 cents a kilowatt hour. That's real money. So by having this adapter, I can now comparison shop using my car. Not only that, but there's so many more charging stations out there for my use when I go, no matter where I'm going now with that CCS adapter. So I'm super happy that I went with the Tesla. I would really love it if Tesla opened their network up to CCS cars. I know it's probably a controversial thing to say, but this cross-pollination, I think, is going to really be an interesting thing. And the reason why I like it is because it'll give me options from a personal standpoint. As if I have a CCS car, it would make me more inclined to purchase a CCS car. Or if we're road tripping Kathy's GV60, now all of a sudden we're like, hey, we've got all these whether they're urban superchargers or Tesla superchargers at our disposal. So I'm pretty happy there. But I also think, listen, it's not every day and every second of every day that Tesla superchargers are jammed. I've been seeing more and more of that here with waiting lines on the East Coast. So for all of you on the left coast, I know we're starting to feel your pain here in the East Coast, but there's often times when superchargers are just sitting there idle. And I know it's probably not Tesla's business model to make money on energy, but I don't believe they're not marking up whatever their cost is. So if they can have more people use the Tesla superchargers when they're not being used, hopefully that would then bring more revenues into the firm, into Tesla, so they can reinvest in more supercharging networks and all of that. We're going through an interesting time right now with respect to the amount of car sales that are out there compared to the infrastructure that is in existence today, and things are going to get wild here. So anyway, I'm happy I bought this car for a lot of different reasons. Specifically today, I wanted to go over the charging curves. Hopefully you found this interesting. I, for one, am super happy I did it. Love the car, and appreciate you watching another episode of Out of Spec Dave. Have a great day. Take care now. Bye-bye.